land up to a concentrated or pinpointed specific issue. So, how to narrow down your work or narrow down your research all depends upon how effectively you go through the literature and how effectively you eliminate those aspects which are covered earlier by earlier investigators, which are not practical, which are not feasible, and which are not of interest to the industry or society. So, like that, with the help of literature review, you will be narrowing down your work by eliminating certain aspects. So, that means define your problem correctly and identify your scope in an effective manner. So your scope should be not too big such that adequate coverage is infeasible and there is too much literature to review and the review becomes unfocused and thereby not useful. So although you consider all the papers related, all the topics related, but you have to slowly identify the exact information which is relevant to your work. Not too narrow again, such that there are too few papers to include. So the number of papers to be considered for review are to be precisely identified. It is conducted to ensure a researcher, I think this is a well written analytical narrative that brings a reader up to date on what is known on a given topic, but also provide fresh insights that advance knowledge. So, literature reviews are nothing but well written analytical narratives. That means you read a paper and you identify the work that has been done by those investigators and what they have reported and to what extent it is useful in your study, in your research. So that point you have to make it very clear in the literature review. So if you combine all such information, then it will give you a clear-cut idea or clear-cut picture of what you have to do, how you have to do, and what are your boundaries. So it resolves conflicts between studies. So if a couple of people study on the same thing, and if one group identifies some information, some conclusion, and suppose in another group they contradict that conclusion. So when you thoroughly understand these two sets of papers, you will be able to identify where the conflict lies, whether it is in the definition of the hypothesis or the data used or the conditions or what. So if there is a conflicting information between two or three groups or even more groups, then your task will be to identify which particular team has not considered some set of parameters or which team has considered superfluous parameters or redundant theories or redundant policies. So identify new ways to interpret research results. So this will also be possible with the help of a thorough literature review and creating a path for future research. Normally, there is another type of report called as anecdotal report. Anecdotal report means just you read something and reproduce by paraphrasing it. So you will not add any comments on it. Whereas a critical literature review contains the author's own or personal comments also on the work that have been done by others. So that is the basic difference between anecdotal report, and a literature review. Review of key elements of definition. A literature review is a summary of research. It is not a list of found research, but a coherent and articulated account of past and current research findings. So it is not just like that. You write, say, A has conducted the work, conducted the study on, say, soil pore parameters or pore pressures, and B has measured the earth pressures. Not just like that. You have to narrate, and also you have to analyze in the context of your research. So that is the thing. A literature review is a summary of research done by others, which you want to interpret to you or which you interpret yourself. So suggestion, you read 2 or 3 literature reviews that are available in some thesis or in papers or anywhere in order to become familiar with some summary styles. So how to summarize? So you go through it. The sources typically are journals, articles, books, and other documents that describe past and present status of research in a given field. Obviously, you have to refer to the published papers. Then, the literature review should be exhaustive and as current as possible. See, it is not just a formality. Literature review, you will have to do it until you completely cover all the aspects on which you intended to carry out your research. So, the limitations, the methods, the data required, the parameters to be evaluated, the variables to be studied, and the way in which you have to present the results, all these aspects are to be covered. So it must be exhaustive. How many articles? There is no set limit. Maybe 100, maybe 200, or maybe just 50, 70. So it all depends upon your topic. How far back should one research? There is no, again, limit in this. A reasonable and widely accepted time frame includes research conducted during the past 10 years. The reason why we put normally 10 years is that beyond 10 years, whatever works that have been covered will be normally identified and they will be reviewed in the earlier or latest journals and latest papers. So there is no necessity for you to normally go back unless until you have taken something directly from that particular reference. Important studies, that is, studies that had a significant impact on the field of study, should also be mentioned, even if these go beyond the mentioned time frame. That is what I just now expressed. Even if it is beyond that 10 years time frame, if you have considered that particular methodology or that particular data or that particular approach, you have to mention it and you have to go back. The literature review should be organized. It should be in an organized way. The review should not only be coherent, but should organize the studies reviewed under themes and topics. If you have identified 5 or 6 objectives, and according, in order to fulfill those objectives, if you have divided your whole work into 4 or 5 tasks, so the task-wise literature review is to be carried out. The reviewer is a guide and should be able to provide readers with an in-depth and current status of the research in a given area. Now, when you have done your research and when you are presenting the literature review, it should be useful to the upcoming researchers. So you should present it in such a way that people need not go further back, further beyond your date of research. So that is a good literature review. This aspect is essential for readers to understand what the reviewer found during the research. There are normally 5 steps for conducting your literature review. Step 1, identify the key terms or the descriptors. Normally, in your field, there will be a key parameter or a key aspect. Suppose you are as a hydraulics engineer or a water resources study, you are interested in rainfall runoff simulation. So, rainfall runoff modeling or rainfall runoff simulation. Suppose you are using a software, say for example, HMS. So, HMS is a keyword. Or you are working on watershed development. So, watershed management, watershed development is a keyword. Suppose you are studying your flood hazards. So, stormwater management, flood analysis, dam break analysis. Like that, you can easily identify the keywords, and with the help of those keywords, you can classify your literature review or literature survey. Use some of the words other authors reported in the literature. So when you go through your literature, under each abstract, they will be writing keywords. So you can correlate the available keyword bank from the earlier publishers or publications or papers. You can also use searches. So there is a descriptor web also. Scan both electronic and library journals from the past 10 years and look for the key terms in the articles. That is step 1. Step 2, you have to locate your literature. Now that you have identified the keywords, so based on those keywords, you will now search. You use libraries. Do not limit your search to electronic search of articles. Actually, nowadays, of course, it has become easy and advisable to go through electronic media because almost all the libraries are nowadays made digital libraries. So you go through the electronic media and also go to your libraries. Use primary and secondary sources. A primary source is research reported by the researcher that conducted the study. A secondary source is, suppose you have reviewed or you have studied one paper. In that paper, the author refers to another work. So that another work which is required for your work is called the secondary source. So try to get back to that secondary source also, get hold of that secondary source also to the extent possible. It is the best report, mostly primary sources. That page doesn't have any reference or value. I have just copied it from somewhere. So it is best to report mostly primary sources. So it's always better to use the primary sources. Search different types of libraries, literature, summaries, encyclopedias, dictionaries, glossaries of terms, handbooks, statistical indexes, reviews, and synthesis books, journals, indexed publications, electronic sources, abstract services, and databases. These are all the sources where from you can get information on how to get your interesting paper. Then the third one is, the first one is identify the keywords. The second one is locate your literature. And the third one is you have to critically evaluate and select the literature. Of so many papers which you have reviewed or which you have studied, you select those which are having direct relevance to your work. So that is selection of literature. And you have to critically evaluate all the selected literature. So rely on journal articles published in national and international journals. Prioritize your search. First look for referred journal articles, then non-referred articles, then books, then conference papers, dissertations, and theses, and then papers posted on website. So this is the order in which you have to proceed. Look for research articles and avoid as much as possible opinion pieces. Normally, uh, there will be some reports that are available which are which express their opinions on a particular finding. The, their opinion is not substantiated by any data or any analysis. Just they feel that physically this may be possible. So like that, they express their views in the form of an opinion. So those opinions we cannot consider because they don't have a supporting data or supporting analysis or any proof. Blend qualitative and quantitative research in your review. So both it should be qualitative and as well as quantitative. That means you have to select the best possible uh, papers and also the number of papers which are required, which are as many as required for your work. Then fourth one is organize the literature. So first you have selected the keywords, then you have located the literature, then you have critically analyzed and selected, and then now you organize it. So you arrange as per the tasks you have identified, as per the objectives you have framed, as per your requirements. So create a file or abstract system to keep track of what you read. Each article you read should be summarized in one page containing title, source, research problem, research questions or hypothesis, data collection procedure, results or findings. So in this particular way, when once you read a paper, you read it and arrange the information in this order. So the title, the source. Now why this title, source, etc. are required is that at a later stage, when you finalize your literature review and your research, you have to give references. So such an organized organization of the literature that you have conducted will help you in properly uh, citing your references. So, one or two lines. What is the research problem? You need not give paragraphs. 3 or 4 paragraphs are not required. Just few lines. Then questions or hypothesis. Data collection procedure. That means description of sample characteristics can be very handy as well. Results or findings. Sort these abstracts into groups of related topics as per your objectives or as per your task. Then fourth one is you write a literature review. So there are two types of reviews: a thematic review, study by study review. Thematic review is a theme. A theme is identified, and studies found under this theme are described. Major ideas and findings are reported rather than details. Study by study review, a detailed summary of each study under a broad theme is provided. So link summaries or abstracts using transitional sentences. You have to link the summaries. That means one procedure is to identify a theme and then collect all the papers you have reviewed under that theme and present it. Then the second one is you take the papers as it is and study by study in the chronological order. You report and try to link it to the theme or the object to which you are considering. But the first one is always better one. So now there are two literature reviews. The literature review has to be carried out in two stages. One is a preliminary, and this other is a thorough literature review. In preliminary, the objective is just to get an idea of what is the state of the art and identify your problem. This is a succinct review of current literature should provide further contextual background, reveal issues related to your study, describe similar problems in other organizations, provide significance to your approach to the study. So with this, you form the foundation for your research. So your preliminary research should always be taken first, even before you start your or identify your research problem, even before you write your statement. So, because normally people come and ask what problem I have to take. All the MTech students in general, they have a doubt which they have to study. So they will depend only on the supervisor, on the guide to give a problem. So what happens is, though that approach is acceptable, but the best thing is the student or the researcher, he himself or she, go through the available information in a particular area in which he or she is interested to work, and then make a mind on a particular problem. Then go and identify what is lacking in that area and which problem can be considered for further research. So it will provide significance to your approach to study. Does your draft follow the logic or idea that is presented in your introduction and title? So there are certain guidelines on the style, the mechanics and language usage in your literature. See, first you write a draft literature report, literature review. So is it logical, or the idea that is presented in your introduction and title are matching or not? See, you write something in your introduction. You write something that you want to work on certain aspects, and you don't go through the related papers. So that is a mismatch. Then avoid overusing direct quotations, especially long ones. Now, when you are reporting something, nowadays all people are doing the cut and paste. So when we go further on the plagiarism and ethics, we'll discuss. So this type of copying and pasting, cutting and pasting is not allowed. But sometimes it becomes inevitable to directly use the matter reported by someone. Then what we have to do is we have to put within the quotations. So that should be limited to one or two sentences only, not two big paragraphs. Then check style manual for correct use and the citations. See, these are some of the 1 minute. These are some of the ways in which you have to refer to the previous authors. So one way is just write the name followed by year. The other way is write the author name and year in brackets. If there are two authors, write like this and the year. Or you can also either use A and end or this ampersand. Suppose the same idea is given by more than in case of more than one or two references, then you can combine and write like this. And when the number of authors are more than two, normally we write the first author. Say for example, here I will write it. Suppose a paper is written by 4 people. The first author is Joe. And then what we have to try use is et al. And within brackets like this you can write. You can also write like this. They can you can use this et al or and others. But the only thing is you have to use consistently one. In your report, at some places you write et al, and at some other places, if you write and others, it is not acceptable. Avoiding using one more thing. See, you should always write the second name, but not the first name. In our most of the papers we see, suppose you are referring to my paper. My paper, I have written ML Narsimham, some paper. Then you have to write only Narsimham, not ML Narsimham. Or at the maximum, you can write Narsimham ML. So like that you have to write. So the second and first names need not be written in your literature review part. Similarly, in the references, this of course, this point I will illustrate later. In the references, when you write, you have to again use the second name or last name, then the second name and first name should follow. Okay, this point I will anyhow explain. avoid using synonyms for recurring words. This is not a creative writing, and stay consistent with terminology. So you have to use phonics cohort and experimental group. So there must be a proper way of grouping them. Here I can say you can use the chronological order, or you can use the order in which the successive research has been done. Then spell out all acronyms when first using them. Suppose when you are using abbreviations, so you first I have to identify those abbreviations first when you use it. So for that, there is a reference. You have to follow this. American Psychological Association. So APA. So APA has prescribed how traditional acronyms are to be used. So non-traditional, it is collective efficacy. That means you can choose your one. If it is a non-traditional one, you can make your own abbreviation, but you have to define it in the beginning. Yes, do not use contractions. No, normally we should not write, or we should not use the words yes and no while we are writing the literature review. Then coined terms should be set off by quotes. Suppose you have coined a particular terminology or a name, then you have to put it in the quotations. Say, for example, I have identified a particular number to be not exactly palindrome number. Palindrome means if you read in one order and the reverse order, they will give the same thing. So now what I do is, suppose there is a slight difference. With that slight difference, it appears to be palindrome. So I call it as a pseudo palindrome. Nowhere that word is there in the dictionary or anywhere available, say for example. Then for the first time I am using that palindrome, pseudo palindrome. Then I have to put it in quotation. Similarly, during 1989, when I was conducting a study on action plan for Pandava Basin, I have taken the number of tanks, irrigation tanks, and then I have studied their effectiveness and then their utilization aspects. So in that context, I defined for the first time two parameters. One is tank effectiveness ratio, and I called it as TER. Then tank utilization factor, TUF. So I have coined the word tank utilization factor and tank effectiveness ratio. So I have to give the definition first and then given the quotations tank utilization factor and within brackets TUF. Subsequently, I can use that word TUF. So like that, that is how the collective efficacy means. And sorry, the coined terms should be set off by quotes. To avoid using these words, slang words, cool, thing, item, or feature, or idioms, like rise to the pinnacle, to become prominent. All these are allowed in a literary report, not literature report, literature review. In an article or in a magazine article, you can use these things, but not in a technical literature review. Use great care to avoid plagiarism. Now, what is the things to be included in your literature review? What needs to be included in the literature review? Provides contextual background, reveals related issues, reviews similar problems elsewhere, provides significance to your approach to the study, includes major seminar research articles pertaining to study, written in an integrated manner, uses peer-reviewed research, includes a reference section. So, the background, the contextual background of your study will be provided through your literature review. So, you have to try to link the background of the work and your research problem. It should reveal all the related issues. What issues have been attempted earlier and what issues are left to be attempted. Review similar problems elsewhere. Somewhere a similar problem has been studied. Provide significance to your approach to the study. So, once you do this literature review, it will provide a significance approach, a path to your study. So it should be included. It should include our research articles, then written in an integrated manner. Use peer-reviewed research. That means that, see, normally people refer to conferences conducted at a very low level, say the department level or the college level. So within the department or within the college, they organize the seminars, conferences, and people present it. See, they don't have any standard. They are not recognized. So all the references are to be made to the peer-reviewed research. See, there is a number called as ISN number. So for each journal, that will be there. So that has to be followed. Then ultimately, all the literature which you have reviewed should be listed in your reference section. This is not required here. Now, what I do is, I will give some samples on literature review. Just give me some time. I will be back within 5 minutes. Literature review, how has been done? An effective literature review should flesh out the background of your study. It should critically assess important research trends or areas of interest. It should identify potential gaps in knowledge. It should establish a need for the current and future research projects. And it should substantiate the scope of the problem. So it provides, literature review provides context for and details about the motivation for the project. And it states why the problem is important. So when you complete your literature review, the person reading the literature review should understand why the problem is important. Sets the scene for the work described in the thesis. So by reading your literature review, the reader will understand what you are going to do or on what aspect you are going to carry out your research, and that is contained in subsequent chapters. Describes what others have done and hence sets a benchmark for the current project. That means it justifies the use of specific techniques or problem-solving procedures. So writing literature reviews, the key point is, after assessing the literature in your field, you should be able to answer the following questions. So when you are able to answer these following questions, then it means that your literature review is perfect. Why should we study further this research topic or problem? So you should get an answer for that. What contributions will my study make to the existing literature? That means there is already a certain state of art of the knowledge. So when I do my research, will it be adding to the existing state of art of the knowledge or not? Limit to the state of art of relevant to your thesis. Again, a specific heading is appropriate. See, when you are writing, suppose previous work on rainfall runoff modeling using SCS curve number. So that means you should give the reader an information about what is the approach and what is the problem. So previous work on the rainfall runoff modeling, that is the problem. Using SCS curve number, that is the approach. So the idea is to present, not analyze, the major ideas in the state of the art, right up to, but not including your own personal brilliant ideas. You don't include your ideas, only what others have done it. So that's why previous work on rainfall runoff modeling using SCS curve number. You may either use SCS curve number method or some other method. Must relate to your study. That means you should be in a comfortable position, in a homely position, that whatever you study is related to your work. Summarize beginning and end. So that means compare, contrast, and synthesize. Not an annotated bibliography. That means you just don't write a list of papers. You have to compare, contrast, and synthesize. It should be extensive, if not exhaustive. Present all ideas. We owe almost our knowledge not to those who have agreed, but to those who have differed also. This is a famous word from Charles Caleb Garton, who lived in 1780 to 1832. Says that whatever information which we have got, who have agreed on a particular aspect, but also on those who have differed. Like if there is a story There will be a hero and as well as a villain. Without villain, there is no hero. So like that, without contradictory ideas, no compromise ideas are acceptable. So current historical study, and it should be seminal and germinal. That means part-wise and integrated-wise. Make it a point to keep on top of your field of study by making regular visits to the library and to the electronic journals and websites. When reading a technical paper, jot down the key points. This is all what I have told in the Creswell's 5 points. So when reading a technical paper, jot down the key points and make a note of the journal or technical publication where the paper was published. Devise a cataloging system that will allow you to retrieve the paper quickly. Actually, there is a software also, Evernote software. So you can enter into it, but many people are not familiar with that software. Devise a cataloging. Make sure that you have read and understood the cited work. Just not glance at the paper. You have to read and understand. Tips of literature review. I have covered them in Creswell's 5 steps. Organize your content according to ideas instead of individual publications. Do not simply quote or paraphrase the contents of published articles. Weave the information into focused views. That means combine one idea from one paper and another idea from another paper and link it to your work. Demonstrate your deeper understanding of the topic. Do not be tempted to summarize everything you have read. Only include those relevant to your main points. That means process of elimination. What are the tips on drafting a literature review? Categorize the literature into recognizable topic clusters. Stake out the various positions that are relevant to your project. Build on conclusions that lead to your project or demonstrate the places where the literature is lacking. That means knowledge gap identification. Avoid Smith says X or Jones says Y, something like that. Avoid including all the studies on the subject. Gradually establish the need to take up the study. Avoid polemics, praise, and blame. That means you have found something very interesting, and if you say that it is very good, you should not add all adjectives and discuss them. That is called as polemics. Or you should not give exclamatory adjectives praising it or blaming it. Suppose I will give you an example. Here, the work was on teaching methods in mathematics. So the research is related to teaching methods in mathematics. So a person has written like this. Other studies also support the conclusion that traditional teaching methods hinder learning calculus. Selden, and Mason, that is what they have written, conclude that isolated trivial problems, the norm in many classrooms, inhibit students from acquiring the ability to generalize calculus problem-solving skills than other names. Similar results are reported by Norman and Picard. They demonstrate that, see how they have taken one point and then what has been studied by one group, another group, and how they are interlinked. They demonstrate that many learners cannot interpret the structure of a problem beyond surface level symbols. They show that novices have inaccurate intuitions about problems which lead them to attempt incorrect solution strategies. No. There's another one. In fact, this is from my own students' work, I think. No, it's not from somebody else. Increasingly, the research community is turning to coupled land surface atmosphere ocean models with dynamic modules to achieve the realism necessary for climate studies. Most of the studies to date have incorporated equilibrium visitation models into climate change simulations. So here they are establishing the basic foundation. Most of the studies to date have incorporated equilibrium models, equilibrium visitation models. So that is a study. And most of the researchers have conducted the study using that. So who are they? Nelson and Marks, 1994, Cole et al., 1998. It is recognized that the next stage is to include dynamic representation of the terrestrial biosphere. That means, obviously, the reviewer has identified one basic fundamental or foundation model, and then what is the next stage. So like that, he is going to build up. Yeah, this is the one from my students' work. Remote sensing has already demonstrated its great potential as monitoring tool for many management applications, especially in natural landscapes. Its use for surveying urban population is less obvious. So here, the researcher has identified the remote sensing as a tool that has been used by many management applications, but its use in urban population studies is less obvious. So by this he has identified the knowledge gap with respect to usage of remote sensing tools in urban population studies. But combined approaches using collateral information sources are worth of interest. So someone, Piyush Badout, has carried out a study on the problem of accuracy of population estimates in pragmatic way using remote sensing, reporting that traditional approaches are generally not applicable in most cases. So yeah, yes, identified that one particular researcher has reported that the traditional approaches are not applicable in most of the cases. Another thing, Wang HH, 1990, estimated the population somewhere for the year 1990 with the help of land using density method. So here the problem and the approach. Problem is estimation of population. Approach is density method, land density, with the help of land use. Actually, it's not land using, it is land use density method. So in this method, the selection of sample regions is difficult. So Wang pointed out a land using density algorithm method for the estimation of urban population using multispectral imagery. So like that, land using density. So he has built up stepwise the effectiveness or the people who have used that land using density method and how that this particular researcher is going to consider in his study. Langford et al., another example, used a classification-based approach to estimate the population of 49 census wards. Again, the problem is estimation of population and the approach, classification-based approach. In northern Leicester style. That means the location also he has given. The explanatory variables were here. He has given, in addition, an information on the variables that are considered. So, like this, when we write our research literature review, we'll get information on what type of approach we have to proceed, and what variables we have to consider, and what type of method of presentation is required, and what type of classification or analysis of the results can be done. For example, here, in each 5 land use categories obtained by performing a supervised classification of a Landsat imagery. So, like that, these are the examples. Okay, it's already 4:30. So, after literature review, we will go to the plagiarism and ethics. I will try to complete this at the earliest possible because I am feeling a little uneasy. So, what are ethics? Ethical issues in research are negotiating access, data protection, and academic integrity. That means you get an access. That means an approach to get some information. And that you will be using it. So while using it, you should take precaution that will not cross the limits. That means your presentation or your usage of a particular information that is accessible to you is harmful to someone. Similarly, the data protection. The data generated by someone, if you are using it, you are encroaching on his property. So that is data protection. Then academic integrity. Report whatever work someone has done it and claim it yourself. That is not integrity. So you are lacking academic integrity. So the appropriateness of researchers' behavior in relation to the rights and fair treatment of the subject of research work or people who are affected by the research. So that is actually what is relates to research ethics. Ethics related to research subjects, research facilitators, research collaborators, and research users. So when you are copying and using it, all these people are affected. So what are the general ethical issues in research? Privacy of participants. So the privacy of the person who has done some work is not maintained if you just report it without his permission. Voluntary nature of participation and right to withdraw. Now what you can do is, you yourself can say that this is open. This particular work is open. Like we have open source software. Open source software, anyone can use it. But sometimes what happens is, the companies withdraw, they remove it from open source. And those who are using it are liable for punishment. So, consent and possible deception. So, you can get consent from someone to use their information, or otherwise also. Now, maintaining confidentiality of the data. So, you can say that the data is used, but the confidentiality of their data is maintained. Reaction of participants to how data are collected. If you comment on the methods of data collection by others, so their reactions will be separate or different. So you have to take care. effects on participants on how data are used, analyzed, and reported, and behavior and objectivity of researcher, the way in which you report. See, all this normally comes mostly in literature review. So, the wording which you use and the way in which you report, it reflects your behavioral aspect and with what objective you are reporting the information. So, all these issues are ethical issues. Now, all these issues are related while carrying out the research. Actually, ethical issues are classified into research, data collection, and reporting. So, these ethical issues which I have given here are related to the carrying out of research. Then, data collection. Stay within the agreed limits or explicitly negotiate extensions. So, if you are permitted to use some set of data, so you have to stay within that limit. Or if you want to use further data, you have to negotiate and get permission. Maintain objectivity. Record and retain data, both supporting and opposing your viewpoint. This is very important. See, when you have generated a data and when you are making it open, you record it and retain the data which supports your findings and which oppose your viewpoint also. So clearly mention and maintain that record. Maintain confidentiality of the data. Suppose you have borrowed data from someone with specific permission for your use and for the particular work for which it is intended. Suppose you get data from Central Water Commission for conducting some dam break analysis of a particular dam, say for example, Pulchindala Dam. And what you have to do is you have to use the data for dam break analysis of Pulchindala, but not for flood management or for a rainfall runoff or flood routing or for any other purpose. See, if the same data is useful for conducting research other than for which you got permission, you should not use it. So that is the confidentiality of the data. Treat research subjects with courtesy. That is the minimum thing expected. While reporting, maintain your objectivity. Don't cook the results. See, normally when you are using the data and analyzing it and reporting it, sometimes what will happen is you may get results which are unexpected. So then don't try to manage the data. Don't try to change the data. See, you have to identify the reason for which such a behavior has come by using that particular type of data. So that you will mention as a limitation. Don't try to manipulate the data and present a beautiful picture of your finding. Ensure that anonymity is maintained unless consent to use real names is given. So this is very clear. You have to not mention the names unless otherwise you are permitted to use. Ensure the participants can't be identified indirectly. Not only that the real names are to be avoided, but also any information that leads to identify the person is also to be avoided. try to ensure that results are not abused. So you should not use the results for any other purpose and abuse the results. Now, let us come to plagiarism. What is plagiarism? Claiming someone else's work, that is intellectual property theft. Be fair to other people's work. Intellectual property is all academics have. So, in academics, you have intellectual property. So, plagiarism means it is your failure. Plagiarism, reproducing someone's ideas or words and reporting them as one's own. That is our work. What normally we do, many of us fail to understand what is meant by plagiarism. Many of us conceive that all content that is available in the electronic media is in the public domain. So we think that whatever is available in the internet can be copied and pasted and used, but that is not so. Plagiarism is not limited to journalism. Normally, it is very common in journalism and music, ideas. It extends to our academia also. So to check that, there are systems. They are called as plagiarism detection systems, PDS. That is software. So that software check the material submitted by any person against the database of electronic content. So they compare. So here I am referring to plagiarism. So I should be very careful. That is why clearly on the top of all these slides, I have written the reference or the person who has given that information. Plagiarism is the act of stealing someone else's work and attempting to pass it off as your own. This can apply to anything from term papers to photographs to songs, even ideas. So this is the definition by this particular person. Next, copyright is a form of protection provided by the laws. Of course, he is referring to United States, but it is generally anywhere. A form of protection provided by the laws of United States to the authors of original works of authorship, including literary, dramatic, musical, artistic, and certain other intellectual works. This protection is available to both published and unpublished works. Fair use is a statute under copyright law that allows for the use of limited portions of a work that has copyright without having to have permission from the original author. It was created for the purpose of education and research. It is a little harder to pin down than plagiarism or copyright. So here, one thing what we have seen here is the definition of plagiarism, and then what a copyright is, and then what is a fair use. So, plagiarism is a negative aspect. Copyright is a protection. Fair use is a limited usage or permission to use to certain extent. So why plagiarism is bad? It infringes academic ethics and norms. It is a form of theft or fraud. It is self-cheating. You are cheating yourself and also cheating others and followers. It clearly projects your incompetence. So that is why plagiarism is bad. So there are some types of plagiarism. Simple or direct copying and patchwork plagiarism and paraphrasing plagiarism. And lastly, unintentional plagiarism. I think these are the 4 types here. So simple or direct copying. That means you just copy. Then patchwork plagiarism is borrowing phrases and clauses from an original resource and reports or reproduces without putting quotation marks, or citing the original author. So you copy from uh, a part of the report and then put it without using quotations or without giving the author's name within the bracket. So that is called as a patchwork plagiarism. Then paraphrasing plagiarism, plagiarizer paraphrases or summarizes. What they do is, what is paraphrasing? Normally, I think in your English, in your earlier classes, maybe 10th or something, you will be given a 4 or 5 paragraphs, and you are asked to condense it. So what you normally do is you condense it by using the same paraphrases or same material or same words used in this. And the only thing is you eliminate certain additional information and reduce its size to say 1/3. So that is paraphrasing. So that type of thing also is not allowed. So plagiarizer paraphrases or summarizes another's work without citing the source. See, if you paraphrase it, is okay, but you have to cite the source. So even when some words are changed a little or using synonyms, but retaining the author's essential thought, sentence structure, and or style without citing the source is still considered plagiarism. So paraphrasing is not plagiarism, but paraphrasing without citing the source, without giving the name of the original author or original investigator. That is plagiarism. Then unintentional plagiarism. The writer incorrectly quotes. See, you take paper or information from one paper and you attribute to another. So there will be 2 things. One, you are not committing a mistake in quoting. The other is you are causing a harm to another person, actual person to whom the credit should be given. You are giving undue credit to someone else who doesn't deserve. So this is unintentional plagiarism. So what are the steps you have to take to control this, to combat, to avoid plagiarism? one should understand what constitutes plagiarism and the need to avoid the same. So you should understand that plagiarism of these aspects which you have referred, simple or direct copying, then patchwork plagiarism, and paraphrasing plagiarism, and unintentional plagiarism. So you should understand these things and quote properly and include the source without ambiguity. Follow standard methods of citing the sources. Acknowledge properly wherever necessary, especially while using bulk data from others. Include the material used from other sources in the form of annexes with proper citation. If you are using more information, then put it in an annexer and clearly say that this is extracted from that particular paper. You can give the whole paper also. Give it as an annexer. Obtain written approval while using the data from other sources. So that is very much required. When you are quoting directly, keep the person's name near the quote in your notes and in your paper. Select those direct quotes that make the most impact in your paper. Too many direct quotes are not allowed, or they will lessen your credibility. Mention the person's name either at the beginning of the quote or in the middle or at the end. Somewhere you have to mention. Put quotation marks around the text that you are quoting. Indicate added phrases in brackets and omitted text ellipses. That means if you are adding any information, use this set of brackets. And if you omit any text, you just put this symbol. You need not continue. You need not write that eliminated or omitted information. That means if it is too lengthy information, you can just use like this. So this is the source where from I got this information. So all of you can refer to this. So when you are quoting indirectly, keep the person's name near the text in your notes and in your paper. Same thing. In the direct quoting and indirect quoting also, the person's name is to be given. Rewrite the key ideas using different words and sentence structure than the original text. So that means you are indirectly using the key idea. Mention the person's name either again at the beginning or end. Double check to make sure that your words and sentence structure are different than the original text. Ensure you note exact page numbers in the reference. So you give the page numbers. When you are doing the paraphrasing and summarizing, action during writing process. First, write your paraphrase and summary without looking at the original text. So you rely only on your memory. Next, check your reversion with the original for content, accuracy, and mistakenly borrowed phrases. Appearance on the finished product. Begin your summary with a statement giving the credit to the source according to someone. No, you paraphrase it. Put any unique words or phrases that you cannot change or do not want to change in the quotation marks. So, use quotations. Ensure you note exact page numbers in the reference. So while you are writing the process, mark everything that is someone else's words with a big Q quotation or with big quotation marks. Indicate in your notes which ideas are taken from sources and which your own insights be. So you can write yes when you are preparing a note on your research, so that when you reproduce this information, you will be knowing whether it is your own source or whether it is from someone. Record all of the relevant documentation information in your notes. Ensure you note exact page numbers of in the reference. So this is only not for this particular part when researching and note taking. It is only for your facility, not while writing your thesis or while writing your literature review. So these are the list of plagiarism detection systems. www.veryguide1.csc.cuhk.edu.hk. So like that, there are many. I think there is another thing also. So many things are there. Web addresses of some address, some PDFs. So I have given this information to you and you can follow it. So this is what I wanted to discuss today, and I will be stopping here, and I will pass on a note on ethics, a detailed note on ethics.